This is the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Welcome back here on Wednesday, September 25th, 2019, getting towards the end of the month here of September, and with it being a fall officially now this week, football is in full swing, and I want to talk about Jerry Jones and his recent comments about Jason Garrett that he made earlier this week, I guess yesterday I think it was. So before we jump into that, just want to remind everyone you can find this podcast everywhere you like to listen, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud, all of those great places, and make sure to rate and also subscribe so you can get all of the new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So during a recent radio appearance on 105.3 The Fan, Jerry Jones said that he did not want to talk about Jason Garrett's contract situation. Right now, Garrett is in the final year of his current contract. The Cowboys have not re-upped him and gave him an extension as of yet. It's kind of a little weird for him. Garrett's been there for about 10 years now as head coach, and he's never really had to play, go about a contract year. Usually they just kind of re-up him, showing their confidence in him. They've had him stick around there for now all of these seasons. He's been there around the franchise for close to 2 decades between his time as an assistant, now head coach, also some time as a player. So he has been around the Cowboys and a mainstay of the organization for a while now. So for him to not have a contract beyond this current season is a little weird. And by Jerry Jones not saying anything, it's kind of hinting at the fact that Garrett, after all of these years of us speculating in the media of if he's on the hot seat, it seems like he actually is on the hot seat within his organization. And that if he doesn't produce this season, it looks like Jason Garrett is on his way out. And with this, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of talk about if this time with Jason Garrett has been kind of successful for the Dallas Cowboys. And the overall narrative around Garrett and at the Cowboys has been that he's stayed around there too long, that Jerry Jones has been a little too partial to his head coach, and they should have gotten rid of him a long time ago, and that Jason Garrett really has not produced that much for the Cowboys, or at least enough in order to warrant him being there for this long. And it's an opinion that I've always kind of held a little bit, wondering why exactly does Jason Garrett still have a job year after year? We say he's on the hot seat, it doesn't really produce all that much, and then ends up still with the job the next season. However, I decided to go back and look. I decided to go back and check out and see just how either bad or good this whole Jason Garrett time in Dallas has been, and see how it'll be kind of remembered if this is his last season. And when you get down to the numbers, it begins to see maybe we've been a little bit wrong about Jason Garrett and his time in Dallas. That, yeah, it has not been the most successful time, even in their franchise history. I mean, it's a franchise that has won several Super Bowls, have had incredible times. Think about the 90s with Irvin, Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, all of those great seasons. So obviously it's not the best time in franchise history. But during his time, he's gone 80-59 during the regular season. That's over 500 by 21 games. Now, during the playoffs, not as great, just 2-3 in the playoffs. He's never made it to a Super Bowl or NFC Championship game, which is a little bit of a blemish, but also you have to look back at that 2014, during the 2014-2015 playoffs against Green Bay, when that whole Dez Bryant, was it a catch, was it not a catch? NFL comes back a couple years later, basically says it was a catch with their new rule changes. So while I don't like to kind of go back and have revisionist history, that's something that you have to kind of, I think, put into consideration. Other than that, recently, last season, they went 10-6, had the NFC East crown. It was the third time in the past 5 seasons that they've won the division title. So as you look at his time, just by the pure numbers basis, it seems they've been a solid team. They've been, maybe underperformed a little bit in the playoffs, but overall a good tenure. But when you get into some other judgments of, okay, what has Jason Garrett done? He's done some of the most important things that a head coach needs to do for an NFL team. Number one, developing a franchise QB. You look at Dak Prescott right now. Check out, if you look at his stats so far this season have been astronomical. His completion percentage basically just off the charts in an 80% in some of these games. It's just absolutely crazy the type of numbers that he's put up so far. But if you just take a look at how he's developed Dak Prescott, he's taken this player who, a 4th-round pick, and he's turned him into a franchise QB. Now, obviously, you have to give a lot of the credit to Dak Prescott. He's the quarterback. But in the NFL and in football in general, a lot of times that coach and the QB combo kind of goes hand in hand. When we think about the great head coaches or the great QBs, they're always kind of together. I mean, whether it's currently in the NFL, Drew Brees and Sean Payton, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. There's always kind of a correlation there. There's usually always a great coach alongside a great QB, and that's kind of how it works. That's kind of how the synergy is. I mean, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. There's a lot of great head coach and quarterback combos. And while they don't necessarily, I guess, completely need each other to be successful. I mean, Phillip Rivers has had, been pretty good throughout his career, and he's never had, I guess you would say, a Hall of Fame coach for a long period of time like someone like Drew Brees has had or somebody like Tom Brady has had. But when they're together, and especially earlier in their careers, if you can develop that QB, that shows a lot for a head coach. I mean, think about somebody like Jared Goff under Jeff Fisher, just looked pretty terrible. Was considered a bust, basically, after that first season, and just how bad he looked. It was it was pretty astonishing, honestly, that the Rams used the first overall pick on a guy that looked that bad. You get him the right head coach, though, in McVay, and look where he's able to take off now. Now showing he's a much better QB. So the head coach in football has a ton of sway when it comes to the quarterback position, the most important position in all of sports. And what we've seen from Jason Garrett in his tenure is he's developed now Dak Prescott, the next franchise QB for Dallas. He's developed him, and it looks like Dak is one of the best young QBs in the NFL right now. Recently, I talked about some of the best young quarterbacks, and when you start throwing around those names, I mean, I would take Patrick Mahomes over Dak Prescott. Maybe Deshaun Watson, I think, is more talented probably, but Dak is more available, and sometimes availability is more important. I mean, I love Carson Wentz, but again, that availability, that injury concern. You look at Dak Prescott, and now the way he's grown, especially early this season, is he continually improves. He's continually getting better at that position, and I think that comes down a lot to coaching. And franchise QBs are the most important thing to an NFL team. So I give Jason Garrett a lot of credit for that, developing a great franchise QB. If you want to go back to some numbers, here's another number for you: $5 billion. That's how much the Dallas Cowboys are worth, according to the latest valuations from Forbes. Next closest team, 4.1, the New England Patriots. Dallas Cowboys are the most valuable team in the NFL. By far, by close to $1 billion. And that's they're worth more than 2 teams in Los Angeles, both teams in New York, the team in Chicago, and the team in Philadelphia. 2 of those teams I just mentioned are in their division. And what do all those teams have in common? They're all in bigger media markets than Dallas, which comes down a lot to just how valuable it is. You may be asking, okay, well, why is that important for a head coach? Well, if you look at the most valuable teams, besides a few exceptions in there, I mean, the Washington Redskins are always going to be a valuable football team. The New York Giants, they're going to be a valuable football team. But if you look at the top of the list, usually, the top of the list is populated with the most consistently successful teams of currently. That's what the Patriots are so high up on there, is because even though they're from a solid media market, but nothing comparable to something like Dallas or LA or Chicago or Philly, they're still worth more than those other teams from other bigger media markets because they have that sustained success. That's worth something. It's a dollar amount associated with that. So when you look at the Dallas Cowboys being worth the most, yes, they kind of have that national brand as America's team. Yes, they're in the 5th largest media market, but they're also head and shoulders above everyone else in evaluation because they have those couple of things, but they also have that consistent success on the field. And that's what I kind of want to get back to, is this consistency factor. Is that when you look at Jason Garrett, it kind of comes down at the end of the day to this idea of how much do you value consistency? How much do you value year in and year out being good, being a good football team, making it to the playoffs, having a chance to go do it, having a chance to play for it all. Maybe you're not. Maybe never see in whatever season you're never the clear, heads-on, above everyone else, talent-wise, better than everyone else. You're the clear favorite. Maybe there's never a season like that. But how much do you value every season going in with a chance? I look at a team in the NBA, the Toronto Raptors, a team where year after year they were continually in the playoff hunt. This past season, they go out, they get Kawhi Leonard, and they go for it all in one season, and they're able to break through. And that's incredibly important. And that's awesome. That's great for that franchise. The reason that they were able to finally break through in this one season was because they built up a solid core. They built up that core of players that could carry them and be the backbone of a championship team. So as soon as that star player was available, they're able to go out, get it, and get over the hump. So that's a great example of why you just consistently stay good. Is that, in the NBA, there's all these theories of tanking and getting those high draft picks, try to get those stars that way. But sometimes just being good matters. Just being consistently good, just getting to the playoffs year in and year out. So that way, when a team like the Warriors suffers some injuries, when maybe some teams in your conference underperform a little bit, and there's that hole to get to the championship game, there's a hole to get to that championship and win that title, your team is in position. And the odds are, especially in a game like football where there's constantly injuries, where you never know who's going to go down on the next play. I mean, look at this season already. We've already seen a good amount of quarterback injuries to high-profile names. When you look at that, I mean, you have to start to say, how important to you is it that every single season you have a shot? Every single season you're going into that season saying, okay, we have a shot at winning the championship. We might not be the clear-on favorites, but we're in that conversation. We're going to be competing for it. And that, maybe if some things bounce our right way, all of a sudden we're the ones hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. We're the ones taking home the championship trophy at the end of the season. It really becomes a question of that, of how much you value that as a franchise and how much you value that as a team. That's what the question about Jason Garrett, because he's never had that Super Bowl victory. He's never had that one crazy playoff run. I mean, I look at somebody like Mike McCarthy, who lasted all of those years in Green Bay, and I think a big reason why is because he had that one Super Bowl run, is he got over the top that one time. A lot of other seasons they were in the running. They were certainly, making it to the playoffs or in the fight for the division title, things like that. But really, there was just that one season of a great playoff run. And as of right now, Garrett does not have that. But what you can say about him is, as long as he's been in Dallas, yes, they've had some good talent now during his time, but he has, as a coach, developed that talent, including a franchise quarterback, and gotten them to be in the running each and every season. I think there has to be some value to that. Now, when you're entering a decade and a decade plus, you have to start wondering, okay, where are the next results? So that's why it's fair for Jerry Jones to be questioning, okay, he needs to be doing something. He needs to be going to the NFC Championship. He needs to be going to a Super Bowl for it to be judged why you can continue to be the head coach. But even then, a lot of times with head coaches, you have to take into consideration this is the same thing with quarterbacks and same thing with a lot of things, and stars in the NBA is, okay, you're unhappy with your head coach, you're unhappy with your star, you're unhappy with your QB. Well, you want to get rid of them. Okay. Who are you going to replace them with? How is that going to work out? Because I can give you some examples of some teams who were like, okay, they had to get rid of their coach, they had to get rid of their coach, and they had to do it right then because it just did not feel right. Maybe they rushed into it a little bit, but they just decided, we got to get rid of him, we got to start over, and that's how we can get over the top. And in most instances, it doesn't really work out all that well. When you have a football team that's going to the playoffs, that's winning, it doesn't usually work out that well to just get rid of the coach. I think the best example of this is Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco. Now, I know him and Trent Baalke kind of had their rough up, their dust ups, their disagreements, and that really went a long way to the reason why he got fired. But if you look at his record, I mean, he was really, really good. He was taking at a Super Bowl appearance, was going to the playoffs each and every season. They have one bad year, and they're kind of like, you know what, Jim Harbaugh's a little too much. We're going to get rid of him. Is that he's getting us close to there, but he hasn't really gotten us over the hump. He hasn't really gotten us that Super Bowl win. That's what we're looking for. So we think we're going to go find somebody else to do that. Well, since getting rid of him, they're 20-47 with 3 different head coaches now, and they're currently in the 5th season since firing him. They've had 4 straight double-digit losing seasons. Now this year they're 3-0, and it looks like they're finally turning their franchise around. But the idea that you can just fire a head coach who's producing pretty well, who's good, who's a good head coach, and just you're all of a sudden going to turn your franchise into a Super Bowl winner now just because you got that new guy. I would be a little hesitant to just fire someone who's consistently producing. Who, if Jason Garrett goes to the NFC Championship game this year, you decide, you know what, we need Super Bowl wins, not NFC Championship game bursts, we're going to fire you. I would be concerned about that because in football, a lot of times stability matters. Just having consistency in your organization matters, no matter where you are. Just having the consistent leadership up at the top is so important. If you're constantly getting a new boss each and every year, that's tough. Go back to the quarterback. It's tough to have a new head coach each and every season. It's tough to be going through all of those offensive coordinators or all those different playbooks you have to be learning and different concepts introduced to you. I mean, I think a classic example in the NFL is somebody like Matt Stafford, supremely talented, but has constantly had a rotating cast of head coaches and offensive coordinators. Now, I think part of that is because Stafford has not produced up to this level of talent, but you can see how by having that rotating cast, it's kind of stunted his growth and made him never really truly realize his potential. I look at Dak Prescott getting better and better. I look at this Cowboys team, and they are good. They are a good football team. When it matters most, they seem to be able to get the job done. And I think a lot of that comes back to there's consistency in this organization, that maybe Jason Garrett is not the best X's and O's head coach. Maybe he's not the best head coach in the NFL. Maybe you can make the argument he's not even top 5. Or I think you can make it he's in the top half at least. But just by having that consistency, just by having that steady guy at the top, as he develops his talent around him in this team, you're just you're not that far away from getting a lot further than you've ever been before. I mean, look at this season right now. The Dallas Cowboys are looking good. They are 3-0 first in the NFC East. The Giants, I don't care what you think about Danny Dimes in that first performance. He did that against a terrible Buccaneers secondary. They're losing Saquon Barkley. They're doing nothing. The Washington Redskins are one of the worst teams in football, and it's not very close. Meanwhile, the other big competition in the division, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're going down with all these injuries. Their depth is completely depleted. And go look at their upcoming schedule. It is not easy at all. So I'm looking at the Dallas Cowboys right now, and I'm saying that the Dallas Cowboys, they don't have that easy of a schedule coming up. They have to go at the Saints, which even though Drew Brees is out, it's still a tough place to play. You're still playing against the Packers. They're currently undefeated. But then you have games like at the Jets, a big home division game against the Eagles, going at the Giants. That shouldn't be too tough. So there are definitely some winnable games coming up. It is a tough schedule ahead for the Dallas Cowboys because they have that first place in the division schedule. But when you look at it, this seems like the perfect season of why consistency matters. The 2 bottom feeders in your division, they don't look like they have a shot whatsoever. It just leaves the Cowboys and the Eagles. The Eagles right now going down with some injuries, about to face one of the toughest stretches of their schedule, arguably the toughest stretch of their schedule. The Dallas Cowboys, meanwhile, they're firing on all cylinders because they came in, everyone on the team was on the same page because they're under the same head coach they've had for a couple years. Their QB's continuing to develop and having one of his best seasons ever. And they're looking like they're in clear position to run away with this division. And as some other people are getting injured around the NFC, I know the Packers are looking good, but I don't know how good they exactly are. I don't know. It looks like this could be a real season for the Dallas Cowboys to break through. And I think a big reason is because Jason Garrett's been there a while. There's consistency at the top of that organization. Consistency matters. Knowing what you're going to get day in and day out matters. And yes, Jason Garrett needs to produce this season. But I think this is the year we're going to see all of the benefits of him being there for this long really play themselves out. And that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, subscribe to this on your favorite platform because new episodes come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Also, go down into the show notes and visit that link to jacksonneillpodcast.com. There, you can find all of the old episodes to this podcast, as well as the episodes to my Anything Goes with Jackson Neill interview series and my music discussion podcast. If you're a really big fan of the show, maybe consider becoming a subscriber on Patreon. There, for just a couple dollars a month or even $1 a month, you can get access to cool bonus content that I publish for my sports and music podcasts, as well as cool bonus questions I ask to my interviews on Anything Goes. The link to that is down in the show notes. And, I write, record, produce, do everything for these podcasts myself as a full-time college student. So any little bit of support really, really does help and helps me spend more time making these cool podcasts. If you want to stay up to date on everything I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JacksonNeill20. Today's music is by Analog by Nature with their song CDK Sunday. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you all next time.